Hi everyone, and welcome to our third Product Insights webinar of the year. My name is Chris Bardwell-Doughty. I'm the Product Training Manager here at AccessPay. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into a critical business challenge of fraud and error prevention. We'll explore the increasing threats it poses to UK businesses, the compliance and regulatory landscapes you need to navigate, finally focusing on some practical steps to safeguard your organisation. By the end of this session, you'll have actionable insights to reduce fraud, risk, and protect the bottom line. Earlier this year, our 2024 Financial Trend Report underscored the growing importance of fraud prevention and regulatory compliance for financial leaders. In response to these industry challenges, the AccessPay team has been dedicated to providing our customers with solutions to protect their financial operations and ensure adherence to the evolving regulations. I'm joined today by Chaim Hafner, our pre-sales consultant, and Matt Slater, our senior account manager. They've been at the forefront of fraud and error prevention and have been working to safeguard our customers' organizations. Unfortunately, we don't have time in today's session with a packed agenda to take questions, but our account management team will be following up after today's session. So on to the impact of fraud on UK businesses. The most prevalent type of fraud affecting UK businesses is authorised push payment fraud, or APP fraud. It occurs when a victim is tricked into authorising a payment into an account controlled by a fraudster. And whilst that method of fraud is not new, it's devastatingly effective. On the slide here, you can see some of the most common tactics of APP fraud. Those include phishing, text message scams, and voice phishing. We'll be going through two really interesting examples of that in more detail later in the session. You may already heard of the CEO scam or invoice fraud, but both Chaim and Matt have some great insights into those areas that they're going to share. Now I'm going to hand over to Matt to talk to you more about the impact of APP fraud.
Thanks, Chris. So yes, authorized push payment fraud is actually the most common type of fraud we see today with customers. And this can impact businesses in three main ways. So firstly, financial loss. So if you were to send a payment to a fraudulent account, there's no guarantee that you can recoup the full amount of that payment back. So it can be a fairly significant cost to the business if it is a large supplier payment. Secondly, reputational damage. So suppliers might not want to work with businesses that are deemed susceptible to fraud. Investors might be less willing to invest, and therefore shareholder value might decrease. And finally, customers may be less willing to engage with the business. And then the third and final one is the notable data breach. So if it is found that there is a notable data breach, then it can be reported to the ICO, which is the Information Commissioner's Office, and they can impose fines and penalties if insufficient controls and measures were put in place to prevent this. And this quote on the right-hand side by the UK Finance's annual fraud report just highlights the huge impact to businesses in the economy today. Almost $500 million, that is, I was going to say $500 billion, $500 million was lost to APP fraud in the UK alone in 2023. So this is a hugely significant amount that can be prevented by using our fraud and error controls that are out there available to you. And I think next I'm going to hand over to Chaim, who's going to talk more about the challenges that we face through deepfake scammers.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so there was an incredible story that hit the news back in May this year, and it's almost so unbelievable that you think it was from like a Black Mirror episode. Now, there was a Hong Kong-based employee of the UK engineering group called Arup, and they received a message about a confidential transaction from a person claiming to be the company's UK-based CFO. The employee then joined a video conference with a deepfake version of the CFO and other employees, where they were asked to make a number of transfers to different bank accounts to the tune of £20 million. Only after following up with the group's headquarters did it become apparent that this was all an elaborate scam. Now, this story may seem far-fetched and almost too good to be true, but with AI and other technologies constantly evolving, scammers will be using these tools to defraud individuals and businesses wherever possible, and they'll be looking for any way in to steal money and disappear into the digital ether. So this is a quote from Rob Grieg, the CIO at Arup. I'm not going to read it all out, but it's important to note that the methods and the routes of attacks from fraudsters and scammers that he mentions are very common across all sorts of organizations. That chimes with what we're hearing from some of the prospects and customers we speak to every single week. Now, indeed, Greg said that he hoped that Arup's experience would raise awareness of the increasing sophistication of cyber attackers.
So, whilst the threat of fraud does pose a rising challenge to businesses, there are some things that can help prevent fraudulent attempts from being successful. The first being knowing what to look out for, and these are the 5 red flags you can spot early to protect your organization from scammers. So, unexpected requests from urgent payments, pressure to act quickly or bypass some of those normal procedures that you would already have in place, requests to keep transactions confidential, changes to establish payment processes or account details, and then unsolicited investment opportunities, especially those providing or promising high returns. So I think I'm going to hand back to Haim now to take on the next few slides.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so now we're going to touch upon some laws and regulations that have recently come in and are on the way, designed to help combat fraud. Given royal assent in October 2023, the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act has various provisions designed to combat economic crime, including fraud, money laundering, and the financing of terrorist activities. But the one we're most interested in is the new failure to prevent fraud offence. An in-scope organisation will be criminally liable when an associated person commits a fraud and that organisation didn't have reasonable fraud prevention procedures in place. Prosecutors won't even need to show that the organisation's leaders authorised or even had knowledge of the fraud. Crucially, if successfully convicted, the organisation will be liable for an unlimited fine. The failure to prevent fraud offence will likely be coming into force sometime in the first half of 2025. So if you are an organisation that falls within scope, it's definitely worth having a look at what steps you can take to implement any fraud prevention procedures. Now, the APP fraud reimbursement scheme is due to come into force on the 7th of October this year, so only a couple of weeks' time. It's a mandatory scheme and replaces a voluntary code that some banks have been currently operating under. It's hoped that the new scheme will further encourage and incentivize payment service providers to develop better systems for identifying fraud and effective interventions to change consumer behavior, including improving their onboarding processes. Now, PSPs will have to reimburse victims of APP fraud within 5 business days. That's great for their customers, as it means they won't have to wait long to get their money back. Initially, the payment systems regulator set a maximum mandatory level of reimbursement of £415,000, but this was reduced to just £85,000 earlier this month. Great news for PSPs, as it means they won't have to fork out as much for claims, but it makes it all the more important to have appropriate measures in place for their customers who experience fraud of more than £85,000. So in the last couple of months, we've been busy gathering customer feedback on our account name verification solution and implementing some key changes, most of which revolve around the results screen that shows you your history of searches as well as bulk search results. So first, we've got a better at-a-glance insights, which allows users to quickly see the overall status of their checks with an overview of matches, no matches, partial matches, and any errors. This leads on to more effortless identification. So you can see where you might have a number of no matches or partial matches and know exactly what to look for when investigating those results. A more detailed exploration enables you to seamlessly expand or download those results to delve deep into each AMV check, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. Finally, we've got what was probably the most frequently requested update, improved messaging around partial matches. So when you got a partial match, either because the account name was slightly different or you selected the wrong account type, it wasn't clear in the results screen why you got a partial match and what the correct name on the account is, or if the account type was incorrect. Now you'll be able to see all that information very clearly. To round off the new features, we now have a premium scheduling feature for larger bulk checks. Any bulk file uploaded with up to 500 records in there will still process as normal, but if you want to do larger files, then that will be done by this new premium scheduler. The single checks, small bulk checks, or even checks via the API are all great options, but they're typically used when onboarding new employees, new suppliers, and so on. Basically ensuring the data you enter from now on is correct and checked to reduce the risk of fraud. However, what about all the hundreds and thousands of bank details you already have stored in your ERP or CRM? When was the last time you did an audit or cleanse on all that data to ensure it's correct and up to date? The ability to upload a single file with all that data in to run in the background will take a huge weight off your shoulders and allow you to focus on your day-to-day operations. Our motto is get it right, keep it right. And if you're interested in this feature, simply contact your account manager to have a demo and get this feature unlocked. So here I'm going to give you a quick demo. So whoever has account name verification already set up, you'll be very familiar with this screen. Whoever hasn't seen it before, this is a great first introduction to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a single check, and I'm going to show you the improved messaging first of all. So if I put in some bank details, I'm going to purposely misspell my last name to show what the messaging looks like. Perform the check, and it should come back saying partial match. This account is actually registered to Chaim Hafner with 2 Fs. So that was there already, but this improved messaging here is now new. So there may be a match on the account name. Then if I were to, let's say, select business account instead of personal account and perform another check, again, we'll see the improved messaging there. So we see again, it's pulled up that my last name is spelled differently, but it's also said, hang on now, personal account name may be a match, however, was requested as a business account. So this is basically just telling you, you've selected business, but it's actually a personal account. So what you would do is you go back to personal, you would correct the name, perform a check again, and then it should come up with a full match. There we go, perfect. So that's it on the improved messaging on the single check screen. And then if I come to the results screen in the top right, we get to see the new layout of the results. And as you can see, it's completely different to how it was before. We've got this nice new, easy to follow table format, and everything is compacted down so you can drill down into the results that you need to see. So at the top section, we group all the bulk checks together. So if you did on the previous screen, you used either premium scheduler or the normal bulk checks, that's where they would all show. And you can see how many records were in the check. You can see the file name, when it started and when it ended. So obviously if it's a bulk check, it's going to take a bit of time, and that will all depend on the amount of records in there. You can see how many matches, how many partial matches, no matches or errors. If you did want to download the results or view the results for a bulk check, all you need to do is click select, come down to the bottom, download the selected results, and you'll be able to open those checks up in a CSV format. So if we just take a little bit further down, we get to see the single checks that we just did. So here we go. You can see UI just means it was done within the user interface, and you can actually expand the results here. So we take a look a bit further down, and we'll take a look at the check that I did with my last name incorrectly spelt. So if we expand it there, we can see Chaim Hafner, last name spelt with 1 F instead of 2 Fs, and we see status was partial match. And we've now got the additional information column, which shows how you correctly spell my surname. So this is what was missing on the previous version, and this is what everyone was asking for. So what I'll show you now is the improved download results as well. So if we take a look at the one where we selected the wrong account number and also spelt my name incorrectly, if I click that, download the results, open the spreadsheet. Perfect. So here we can see the downloaded results. We can see the name that we searched for. That was a partial match. Additional information shows the correct spelling of my surname. And here we've got some additional reason codes here. So we see it says this account is registered to Chaim Hafner. Personal account may be a match, however, it was requested as a business account. So this is just letting you know that I selected business instead of personal. So now I'm going to pass on to Chris, who's going to talk about some features in our fraud and error prevention suite.
That's great. Thank you for covering that demo, Chaim. That was really interesting. So Chaim has already covered A&V, which is one of the key parts of the fraud and error prevention suite. And I'm just going to talk very quickly now about 2 other key pillars within that, being payment screening and sanction screening. So just to give you an overview of payment screening, it uses an automated flag system with suspicious payment files being highlighted and transaction monitoring that includes the ability to apply a set of predefined rules and customize those rules within your platform to work with the workflows and processes that you already have in place and offer an enhancement to those. There's the ability to flag potential risks and critical errors prior to payment, before the payment is actually processed and sent on to wherever it might be going. And then a red, amber and green traffic light system that allows for the indication of suspicious transactions that might need attention. For sanction screening, the sanctions are applied by countries and governments, which, as I'm sure everyone is aware, can be very difficult to monitor, track and keep up to date with. And what we do at AccessPay is collate that information, and that allows us to create a searchable database that can be queried at any time, making sure that as part of the fraud and error prevention suite, you're able to include those sanctions within the AMV, payment screening and sanction screening workflows that you may already have. And as well as that, it makes those results visible throughout the UI. So back over to Haim now, and as I promised earlier, he's going to talk more about the CEO scam that I'm sure everybody has heard of.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So the first scenario that I'm going to explain is an example of a CEO scam. So it's not like the Arup case that I mentioned earlier. It's when an employee will receive an email from someone impersonating the CEO. Now, of course, it could also be a senior member of the team as well. And it could have a subject line similar to a confidential admin transfer required. Now, fraudsters are not stupid, and they will have done their research into the CEO and know about their sort of personality type and how they communicate. They may do this through social engineering or any other means. The employee believes the email and they go ahead and send the money. And what we have here in the middle are the short-term side effects of that. The organization must now spend time, money, and resource investigating the incident. The relevant authorities also need to be informed, and that could be law enforcement and regulatory bodies. And obviously, that could have a knock-on effect to the public eventually finding out as well. And this is also dependent on the size and severity of the fraud that has occurred, obviously. And then finally, financial remediation steps need to happen to make sure that you can recover that loss of money. And that's not always guaranteed. You may not always be able to recover that money, but those are the things that need to happen in the short term. With regards to long-term consequences, there's obviously an erosion of trust that happens. So your customers, if this does go public, will definitely see this. The market will see it. So when they're considering a supplier or they're considering an organization for something, they may see this and not want to deal with you for that very reason. Stakeholders may lose faith, and it will likely impact investment opportunities as well. Current investors will be really nervous if an organization they've invested in is a victim of fraud, and it may also block you from being successful in further investment rounds. And then also the time taken for financial remediation and investigation does have a knock-on effect too on day-to-day operations. There are a number of things that you can do and processes that you can implement to make sure that something like this is far less likely to happen. The first is to design and implement a process with strict protocols. So in this example, you might want to mandate something like a secure form request where money can only be sent once this form is completed. If you keep it internal and have an internal process for requesting funds or transfer funds, you can essentially ensure that you are staying away from external factors fraudulently copying your own processes. Then you can also train employees regularly on how to spot suspicious emails. Now, I know we've all had to do the tedious cybersecurity training courses, but they're there for a reason. They help us understand how to identify fraud and how to protect ourselves and our organizations from falling victim to scams like this. Finally, our account name verification solution, or indeed any other solution that verifies pay details, will help flag where an account does not match who they claim to be. So if someone is claiming to be your CEO, they might use the same name or they might use the name of the supplier in communications, but the details won't match when it comes time to pay. And if that's flagged, you can then stop the process and investigate further before you've lost a single penny. As a final failsafe, our payment screening module allows you to put in certain controls and measures. So for example, you could flag all new payments as red, meaning that they must go through an additional check and approval before they're allowed to pass. So basically, one last chance to prevent any fraudulent payments before the payment is processed.
So I'm going to talk about the risk of using banking portals now. And just to walk through the slide deck that's on screen at the moment, you'll see that as we look at the way banking portals are used, organizations are verifying account details through the banking portal. So going through the process of giving employees the login information to that banking portal and setting up a dummy payment, because the way that the account name verification check is embedded into that process requires that step to be taken. The process is long-winded and admin heavy, specifically due to the fact that you have to log in and go through this dummy payment setup. And if you think of the more banking portals you're using, the more exponential all of these risks and administrative processes are. Organizations are exposed to internal fraud because of the number of logins that are being created and the amount of access that's given to those users. And then there are disparate systems that opens the door more specifically to errors. So due to a lack of internal controls, the organization may need to pay a fine due to a failure to prevent a fraud or an offense. And after news of internal fraud has been made public, then there's the obvious reputational damage that may come as a result of that. So how does account name verification through the AccessPay platform address some of those issues? So AccessPay removes the need to give employees access to that banking portal. So there's no reason to be logging in, setting up those dummy payments that could further impact on the quality of data you have within those banking platforms and the accuracy of pay information within them. Throughout the UI, you can set user permissions and control those, and our multi-upload and scheduling feature can streamline that process as and when, meaning that you no longer need to log into multiple accounts or go through that process on a repeated basis. So Matt's going to talk to you now about in-flight conversation hacking, and I'll hand over to him.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so this is particularly important because I have a couple of customers who have fallen victim to this method of fraud. So this is, and this is one of the reasons why I always advise to ring your suppliers instead of emailing them. So I'll run through this example now. So the accounts payable team will often communicate with their suppliers via email, and quite often these are trusted suppliers or individuals that you work with on a daily basis. At which point the fraudsters will hack into your supplier's email account and then start sending you emails containing information saying things like, our account details have changed, can you redirect our monthly payment to this new account? Of course, this new account being fraudulent, the accounts payable team might then follow their instructions, unknowing that it's a fraudster they're talking to over email and not their supplier, and then start sending these supply payments to the fraudulent account. And it's only when the supplier then gets in touch and says, hey, we haven't received these payments, what's going on, is when you've realized that actually these payments have been going to the wrong bank account, at which point there are a number of issues that or impacts that harm the organization. Firstly, the financial loss, which we spoke about earlier. So it's not, you can't be confident of recouping these payments back. The second one is an erosion of trust between the supplier and the organization. So again, reputational damage increases. And then finally, the time taken for financial remediation and investigation into what went wrong can also be costly. So there's two ways in which our customers and organizations can prevent this from happening. Firstly is our account name verification feature. So whenever a supplier comes inbound to you and says, hey, our account details have changed, you can actually confirm that using our account name verification feature, ensuring that the account you're paying to is legitimate, and also what prevents you from paying that fraudulent account. And then the second method is actually via our payment screening tool. And this alerts users of a new beneficiary that you're about to pay. So hopefully increased controls and checks can happen to those users set up on AccessPay when they're notified a new beneficiary is being paid. And then on to the next slide is one of our customers, Maria Maliband. So these are the largest independent providers of UK care homes. And they came to us with a challenge, and that challenge being, firstly, they'd experienced higher, they've been targeted with higher rates of fraud, whether this be by impersonating their banks or impersonating their suppliers. So with that in mind, they came in touch and said, can you help us with this challenge? We don't want to be victims of fraud because we know it's a very prevalent issue in the market today. So the solution we provided was our account name verification check. So with this, they can ensure that the accounts that they're paying are legitimate, and also saves them an enormous amount of time. So Maria Maliband check up to 100 new accounts a month, if not daily, which is time consuming if you're reaching out to suppliers. So using our account name verification tool, it's very quick and easy. Secondly, is duplicated payment. So there has been instances among some of our customers where duplicated payments have been made. Quite often it's the case that you can get them back, but to save an enormous amount of time as well, and the potential of losing that payment, they've implemented payment screening. And then finally, Maria Maliband, with their future plans, are very acquisitive, and they plan to acquire a number of more care homes. And with our bulk upload of our account name verification check, they can check all their new care home supplier details at once, saving them an enormous amount of time. And then on to the final slide, which is a quote by Maria Balaband, which I think sums up very neatly as to why a lot of our customers sign up to this service, which is the reason we signed up to account name verification is to make sure we're paying the right people. So very succinct, very short, but exactly shouts about the need for account name verification. So thanks very much. That's all for me, and I'll pass on to Chris to round things up.
Thanks very much, Matt. So just as for me to finally say thank you very much for taking the time to join us in today's Product Insights webinar. Thank you, Haim and Matt, both for your wonderful insight into all things fraud and error prevention. If you'd like to know more, please feel free to contact your account manager or send an email to the email address you can see on screen there, customersuccess@accesspay.com. And we look forward to seeing you for the next Product Insights webinar. Thank you very much.